Breaking news out of college football, where Auburn has fired head coach Hugh Freeze in the midst of his third season with the Tigers. Auburn dropped to 4-5 on the year following Saturday's 10-3 defeat to Kentucky at Jordan-Hare Stadium. Freeze finishes his career on the Plains with a 15-19 record, failing to record a single winning season with the Tigers. So Auburn will now be looking for its third head coach since the start of the 2021 season. Our Brandon Marcello reports that defensive coordinator DJ Durkin will take over as interim head coach. Let's welcome on John Talty to talk a little bit more about what led to today's breaking news with Hugh Freeze. And John, ultimately, in your opinion, why do you think that this never worked out?
There's a lot of areas. I think to start, when you have an offensive-minded head coach, and he got hired because he was able to beat Alabama a couple of times while he was at Ole Miss and had success there, and it never translated at Auburn. He did not have a lot of NIL experience before he got to Auburn and was certainly slow on the uptake to doing that. I think a year ago, I know myself and others wrote quite a bit about how they should have taken a transfer portal quarterback. He did not. They rolled with Peyton Thorne. Again, it didn't work. Put a lot of pressure on this season to get that decision right. And I wrote about it at the time that there was a lot of skepticism around the industry when he decided to go with Oklahoma quarterback Jackson Arnold, knowing that this was a make or break year for Hugh Freeze, that he would put his job security in the hands of Jackson Arnold. And we saw, I think last night, a great example of that. That did not work out. The offense has not been good enough this season. And that ultimately is a big reason why, Freeze is out of a job today.
And if you look at Auburn in general and the last coaching hires that they've made, there's, of course, been the Brian Harsin experiment that did not work out. And then now you've got Hugh Freeze and opening again, as I mentioned, 3 head coach openings since 2021. In your opinion, why do you think that they just have not gotten that hire right since they fired Gus Malzahn back in 2020?
Yeah, I mean, Auburn has a reputation for having an overactive booster base. We've seen that play out a few times. So if you go back to that Brian Harsin hire, if you remember at the time, some of the most powerful boosters really wanted Kevin Steele to actually get that job. And the AD at the time, Alan Green, really went the other way, cut those people out and said, I'm going to hire my guy, and hired Brian Harsin. And I can remember talking to some of those powerful people at the time and basically said, like, if he didn't get this hire right, he's getting run out of here. And that ultimately happened. The AD was eventually pushed out. He's at Pittsburgh now. So I think after the Harsin, you did see some alignment. I think there were a lot of people who were on board with Hugh Freeze. He's a guy who I think fit from a cultural standpoint as to what Auburn typically looks for, what some of those boosters and supporters want. But clearly that didn't work out this time either. So it'll be really interesting to see with this specific hire, with a new AD and John Cohen, who's been there a couple of years now, how he manages that cycle of boosters wanting to be involved and who they ultimately decide to target. I think you see in situations like this, you try to go maybe the opposite as to what you did before. So Brian Harsin was very outside the box, did not work. Hugh Freeze was about as inside the box of a hire as possible for Auburn. That didn't work either. So we'll see what they do next.
Yeah, that's the big question mark. You mentioned Cohen will be making this decision. Where do you think that Auburn should potentially go with their next hire, given the fact that there are a lot of other big openings currently in college football?
Yeah, there's going to be a few names that I think are going to be mentioned for probably every job, and you're seeing some of the names on screen here. I think John Summerall certainly is the name that jumps out to you the most. There's been a lot of speculation around the industry this year, even of course before Hugh Freeze got fired, that Summerall would make a lot of sense there. His wife went to Auburn. He's from the state of Alabama. There's a lot of natural connections there. But, a guy like Eli Drinkwitz, who's having a great season at Missouri. Brent Key is an Alabama native. Would he be willing to leave his alma mater at Georgia Tech to come to a program like Auburn that typically has more resources, more success? I think that would be a really interesting one. But I think what you hear over and over again, I think what's going to be maybe the defining storyline, for this coaching carousel is, are there enough what we would consider home run hires available for all of these big programs that are jumping into this market? And I think there's already skepticism even before Auburn opened up, even before maybe some of these other jobs we might see come open. So that's going to be a real question that we're already seeing Matt Rule take himself out of the running at Penn State. Rhett Lashley just got a huge deal at SMU. He was a name that you were going to hear. I think now it's, if a Lane Kiffin decides to stay at Ole Miss, where does LSU go? Where does Florida go? There's going to be a potential impact down the line. So we'll see which ADs can be creative and aggressive about maybe trying to secure a guy like John Summerall early and not let maybe LSU try to get him if they don't get Lane. That's going to be really interesting to see how all these programs manage that aspect of things.
Yeah, Curt Cignetti also getting an extension a few weeks ago, so the list of available candidates continues to shrink, yet the open jobs continues to grow. John Talty, thank you so much for breaking that all down for us. We continue to react to the news that Hugh Freeze out at Auburn. Big reason why is this overall record, 15-19, and in conference 6-16 after 2 1-5 starts to SEC play.